We are already taking a call live from India. Here is Ram. How are you, Ram?
Yes, I'm doing great. I'm doing wonderful.
A note here said that you can't prove God, but you can feel him, and wanted to talk about that. So welcome. Please explain.
Okay, thank you. So the last time I called, I was 2 years ago. So I really took your guys' message very seriously, and I became an atheist, and I felt a sense of strength and power within me. The thing that I didn't before. So I was didn't believe in God for a long time, and but things life passed, and I got some issues. I got a lot of issues. I became very sad and hopeless during the time period, and very depressed and all those things. 6 months ago, I started to believe in God again, and I've been thinking and just wanted to discuss what I had thoughts in mind, and so I wanted to discuss a few points with you.
Absolutely. And first of all, I'm really sorry to hear that you found yourself sad and hopeless. I hope that instead of just turning to a God belief, although I'm happy for anything that seems to help people, maybe did you talk to a counselor? Did you reach out to a therapist? Because depression is something that many people deal with.
Yeah, I did talk to a lot of people. Just that
I didn't ask.
Conversation will come up.
Ram, I didn't ask if you talked to a lot of people. I was asking if you talked to an expert, like a mental health expert.
Yes, I did talk to a couple of counselors. I talked to psychiatrists and all those things. So I'll talk about it, and maybe you can give me some points wherein things can change. I can be very glad of that. So
well, I'm not a therapist. I just wanted to make sure that we recommended that. But I'm interested in when you say six months. When you say 6 months ago, I just want to make sure you got help and didn't just go reaching for it. You said 6 months ago you started believing in God again. What convinced you? Yeah. I mean, because I couldn't just I don't know, Jim could, either one of us. I couldn't just say, hey, I believe in God now. Something would have to convince me. And so I'm wondering.
What it'd be really difficult for me to do that. Yeah.
I met someone and they changed my mind, and it was that was it. I met someone and they changed my mind.
Okay, how did they change their mind?
More about it.
How did they change your mind?
So basically, we were talking about science, and they basically said that science cannot explain everything, because science looks at things in a very empirical manner and systematic manner. Okay, it looks at systems and the studies of it, and it fails to highlight the emergent properties from that model. So whatever model we do predict, so there always seems to some properties come emerging out of it. Things which we didn't predict in the initial system, they just come crashing on us, and we have to make a new model to explain things. Okay.
Well,
so this has been the problem of science since ever. So this is inherent.
Yeah. So first of all, I have a friend, Aaron Ra, who's been on the show before, and he likes to say that science doesn't know everything, but religion doesn't know anything. And so when someone tells you that science can't explain everything, it's true that science has not explained everything yet. I don't know how they reached the conclusion that science can't explain everything or ever, but the fact that there may be something that science doesn't explain doesn't mean that it's real, and doesn't mean that religions have an explanation. So what was it that convinced you that a religious explanation was correct?
First of all,
would you just let me finish the question? I know you could hear me. There wasn't a gap in it. I didn't pause at all. I just wanted to get to the question.
I'm sorry. I should have.
Please continue.
Okay. So firstly, I'm not arguing for religion. I'm arguing for God. Okay. And secondly, I think there is an inherent, and they also think that there's an inherent flaw, and I can, in science, to explain certain stuff, and I can explain with an example. Okay. So this example has come up before also. So there is a many scientific theories predict multiple universes and multiple levels of existence. Yes, they do. Like,
Some
for example,
hypotheses do. Yes, there are
yes,
some
and we
hypotheses.
can't
That's
prove
different
those.
than it's different than a theory.
Okay, so some hypothesis, yes, some hypothesis, they say that this could happen. This is like inherent in the system, and we can't prove it until we actually, travel between them, or somehow find a way to bridge the gap between these worlds. And we can't really prove that these things exist, right? And but a lot of these theories, a lot of them, they come to the point of that there are multiple universes, that there are multiple realities and existences, and it just seems so. Everybody, a lot of people, they do believe in this thing, and they work every day towards proving this thing. In science, scientists do that.
Yes, there are some people, I don't know how many to qualify lots. Yes, there are people who accept that there are multiple universes. Yes. So what's your point?
The point is that we can't really prove that there are multiple universes.
Yeah, there's no proof. That's why it's a hypothesis, and that's why I corrected you when you used the word theory, because theory is reserved for things that, if they were proven untrue, it would fundamentally change the way we view something in science. It's the highest accolade for truth that science provides. So it's all hypothetical. Yes, it is hypothetical. Some people believe it, some people don't. So what?
Yeah, Ram, the point is that
Mm-hmm.
there are scientists who are working to try to explain things, and one of them will come up with some of them will come up with a hypothesis, like maybe there are multiple universes, and several other people will say that's a really interesting hypothesis. How could we go about testing it? And then they will work tirelessly. It's not that they believe it's necessarily true; it's that they believe there is benefit to working towards demonstrating that it's true. And the time to believe that there's a multiverse is after that hypothesis is tested and confirmed. That's the way science works. You know what scientists aren't doing? Positing God or supernatural things, because those things aren't testable. So you're comparing apples and oranges, because science, yes, can create a model and say, here's what we think could be happening. Let's try and prove it. And they will work to prove it. And then when they can, then it's time to believe it. But science doesn't say, here's what we think's actually happening. We think there's a supernatural being that created the universe. We just can't prove it. That's not what science does. And so if your point is that science doesn't have an explanation for something, therefore I'm reasonably justified in believing in a God, you are in fact 100% completely, undeniably wrong. Because in order to be justified in believing in a God, you would need to have evidence for that God. Now, you could be perfectly reasonable in saying, I think the God hypothesis is a reasonable hypothesis and we should be working on it. The problem is my now deceased friend Vic Stinger wrote this book, God, the Failed Hypothesis, which goes through why God is not a valid, reasonable hypothesis within science, why it hasn't been demonstrated, why it can't be demonstrated. And so you're calling now to say that you were an atheist for a while, you got depressed, somebody convinced you that because science doesn't know everything, maybe you should turn to God. Well, that is a fallacy, Ram. That's all we're trying to say.
Well, I think that logic is not the only tool in the world, and there are other tools than logic to lead yourself.
Ram,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say anything at all about logic being the only tool in the world. But if you're using a tool and it violates the principles of logic, what reason could you possibly have to think that it's correct? Can you name anything else that has been demonstrated to be the truth that violates logic?
Anything else? Isn't one thing enough?
Okay, what's the one thing? Name one thing that's been demonstrated to be true that violates logic.
Oh, mad fashion. Well, there are a lot of logical paradoxes that exist, and we don't know where.
No, Ram, I apologize, but I asked for something that is demonstrably true that violates logic, something that nobody has ever been able to demonstrate in history. There are things that seem irrational. There are things that violate our understanding of the universe. And there are things that are paradoxes. But I asked for something that was true because you believe in a God now. And when people point out to you that you're engaged in logical fallacies, you say, well, there's other ways of knowing than logic. Prove it. Show that you have a way of demonstrating that a God exists that is more reliable than, so that we should set aside the logical fallacies in your argument. That's what we're saying.
Well, you're saying that prove logic with logic? Is that what you're trying to say that only?
No, and you're not listening, Ram. So I'm going to move on to somebody else, because if we're going to go to all this trouble to point out logical fallacies and then have you say, well, logic isn't the only way of knowing, and then when we ask you to demonstrate some more reliable way of knowing, you're just asking, well, you're saying prove logic with logic? No, you're no longer listening, Ram. You're not thinking about what we're saying at all.
Okay. I'll try it again.
Thank you.
Maybe you have to believe in certain things, and then you have to do it that way.
Well, maybe, are you saying you have to believe in God first? Why would you believe in something first? That is the very definition of how you go about deceiving yourself, by believe something before you have evidence, and then you seek things out that confirm it. That is remembering the hits and avoiding the misses. Now you're engaged in yet another logical fallacy. Do you not care about whether or not your beliefs are true, Ram?
I care, and sometimes, a lot of times in logic also, there are axioms that we think things. For example, we take them for truth, and then we build systems around it. And
Ram, you can do this shit all day long. You are engaged in actively making excuses for why you believe bullshit. You're essentially saying, I can't prove it now, but maybe someday I can. And what I'm saying is the time to believe it is after you can actually demonstrate it. Before then, you are engaged in an act of self-deception and logical fallacies. If you actually care, Ram, whether your beliefs are true, then you should care whether or not you can demonstrate them.
Maybe I can't demonstrate them, but I can definitely tell you what are the positives and why you should do it.
Hang on. I want to make sure I'm clear on this. You're saying you can't demonstrate that it's true, but you can demonstrate the positives and the benefits of believing it. Well, I didn't ask about the positives and benefits of believing it. I asked whether or not it's true. There are plenty of things that one could show positive benefits for believing when the belief isn't true. It is demonstrably not true that any given kid can in fact grow up to be anything they want to be. Yet we tell them that because when they believe that, it encourages them to strive towards better things. But it's a lie. It is absolutely a lie that you can grow up to be whatever you want to be. So pointing out a benefit of something is completely irrelevant. I don't care if there's a benefit to it. I want to know if it's true, because with those benefits also comes baggage, because now you believe something that's not true, and that can be harmful.
Yeah. And I would ask the question, are any of those benefits directly tied to the belief in God, or can they be achieved without the belief in God? So, because I don't know of any benefit of believing in God that I don't have as an atheist, not believing in God.
Yeah.
So, how do you stay happy? And how do you stay content in the fact that, purpose of life and things like bad things happening to, good people all the time, and cancer happening to children.
Ram?
How do you how do you get around this?
That's real simple, Ram. It's real simple. Things happen, right? And we label them good or bad. And sometimes by labeling it bad, then we do in fact make it worse for ourselves. But the fact that things happen doesn't have any effect on whether or not I'm happy over a long period of time. It may affect me in the short period, especially if it's somebody that I care about, where the bad things are happening, or the things that we label that are bad are happening. But honestly, I don't see why I should let that get me down. And I don't see how all of a sudden having a God to blame for bad things happening to good people helps me stay happy. How does that work? Because if there's a God and he's supposed to be all good, and he's allowing bad things to happen to good people, how is he a good God? How does that work?
Yeah, and before you get to answering Jim's question, I want to point out that when you ask how do you stay happy, how do you deal with all these things, yeah, realizing that the universe doesn't exist for me, isn't here to make me happy. Your entire question here is an implied fallacious argument, because it goes like this. Premise one, I'm not happy. Premise two, I'm supposed to be happy. That's the flawed premise. Maybe you're not supposed to be happy. Maybe you're supposed to be legitimately sad, maybe about certain things. Maybe being sad about something is how you begin to learn to take action to prevent those things from happening in the future. If you are just sad about your existence and you decide, hey, I believe in a God, and that makes me happy because this isn't the end of existence and everything else, what you've done is decided to deceive yourself into ignoring the problems, and you will never, ever solve them, and you will never work alongside other people to solve them. Life is painful. Life is hard. Life isn't fair. Life doesn't have any special goal for you. Bad things happen to good people. Bad people get away with things. It is up to us to realize that that is the truth so that we work to solve that problem. If we bury our heads in the sand and pretend that everything happens according to God's plan and God understands the shit we don't understand so we don't have to do anything, that leads to the extinction of humanity. It's a blissful extinction where you get to sit around and go, God, I'm the special creature of a loving God. And that way, when I die, it's not all over. And all this bad stuff happening can just be fucking ignored. It's absolutely disgusting. I know why people do it. I know why it appeals, because it feels good. But I give a shit about the truth and making the world a better place. And I'm not the slightest bit interested in what your unsupported, unrealistic belief in a God. If that makes you happy, cool. I'm sad that you prioritize your happiness over the truth.
Well, I do agree that, doing it to the extent that you're saying it is very, very bad, that you don't look at the pains of life and you just give it up to God and don't fix things. I don't think we should do that at all. But the other way, the atheistic way, is also, it's too extreme. It's too extreme because, I felt a sense of very, very, very hopelessness. Things can't be fixed. I mean, the systems in itself are extremely broken. And
what do you mean things can't be fixed? If you're not going to work on them to fix them, then they're not going to get fixed. If the only thing you do is pray, they're still not going to get fixed because you're not doing anything. So if you want to fix things that are wrong in your community, you need to roll up your sleeves and do the fucking work. You can't just pray.
I don't know what you mean by saying atheism is too extreme. All I'm saying is that I don't believe there's a God. Nobody should believe there's a God until there's a good reason to do so, until there's sufficient evidence for it. How the fuck can that ever be too extreme?
Well, it can get extreme in that for example, that fate itself, like if we have a theistic belief, then we can feel that, okay, it has been done for a reason. Things which are like beyond our control, and there are certain things that are beyond our control. We can work as hard as we like and we can't fix them.
Yes, that's very, very true. How does believing in a God fix that?
How is it remotely extreme to recognize the true facts of reality? You know what's extreme? Opting for a delusion because you're dissatisfied with the facts of reality. That's extreme.
Yeah, and saying that everything happens for a reason, it's true, and that reason is usually physics, but saying that things happen because some God wants them to happen doesn't make that God all good, doesn't make anything better, and it's not acknowledging the reality of your situation. It's not saying that this is something I can't change, so I need to stop worrying about it. I need to stop throwing energy at this and go work on things that I can change. Or I need to sit down, if it's important enough, and figure out a way to change it, figure out what I need to do, and then go do those things. Sometimes people say there are things you can't change because, they don't want to go run for Congress, or they don't want to run for city council, or they don't want to run for, office or do political stuff, and sometimes that's what it takes to change things. If you want to change how the poor are treated, you're going to have to get out and knock on doors and talk to people and change people's minds, and that's a lot of effort, and sometimes that's what they say too. So I don't understand this whole thing of there are things we can't change and therefore God makes it better.
Yeah.
No, that's not the attitude that makes it better. What makes it better is throwing your energy at things you can change or figuring out a way to change it.
I'm genuinely sad, Ram, that you found yourself depressed to the point where you gave up on reality and opted for fantasy. But I'm never, ever, ever going to say that that's the right thing to do, because I care about whether or not something's true. I don't see what's so extreme about being rational.
I don't know. It's less comforting.
Yes, it is less comforting, but that's because you have a fantasy version of what you want reality to be. You are literally, well, all right, not literally because you're using different words. You are essentially saying reality isn't what I want it to be, so I'm going to believe something different. You are taking the Adam Savage, I reject your reality and substitute my own thing, which is comical, and doing it for real. Why?
Isn't the real purpose of life to, have a satisfying, happy life?
No, Ram. When you say isn't the real purpose of life, you've already made a mistake. There is no real purpose of life. Your life can have whatever purpose you attribute to it. There is no externally imposed purpose to life. There's no purpose to life. There is no guarantee or external motivation for you to be happy, for you to be healthy, for you to be knowledgeable, for you to be anything. That's the beauty of it, is that we get to decide what we're going to be. Go ahead.
It's the internal motivation, right? Nobody wants pain. Nobody wants to have endless amounts of pain.
Correct, but you're going to have pain whether you decide to believe in a fictional God or not. So why do it?
You'll have less pain.
No, you won't have less pain. What you're doing is you'll have less reality. And if you want to engage in the I give up on reality, so I'm going to believe there's a God so that I have less pain, what's causing you pain, Ram, is the false expectations that people, including you, have put in your head. You expect life to be fair. You expect life to be happy. You expect life to be this. And when your expectations aren't met, that is saddening. So make your expectations commensurate or comparable to the facts of reality. If I have my expectations of reality, whereas that I'm going to live to be 300, have $1 billion, be the sexiest man on the planet, never have a moment's misery, I'm going to be sad all of my life because none of that's going to be true. But that doesn't mean that I should go believing in a God who has a plan to make me less miserable.
Okay.
I got to move on to other callers. Think about it some more. I'm genuinely sorry that you
think about it.
Yeah, I'm genuinely sorry that you were sad enough that you just went for a God, but you clearly don't value reason and you don't value evidence. You went with how you feel, and that's the pathway to massive misunderstanding. Just trust in your gut.
I'll think about it. I'll think about it some more.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very welcome.